the new God of blessing, the new gods of blessing, the new God of blessing, the new goddess of blessing, the new goddesses of blessing, the new goddess of blessing, the old God of blessing, the old gods of blessing, the old God of blessing, the old goddess of blessing, the old goddesses of blessing, the old goddess of blessing, the greater God of blessing, the greater gods of blessing, the greater God of blessing, the greater goddess of blessing, the greater goddesses of blessing, the greater goddess of blessing, the lesser God of blessing, the lesser gods of blessing, the lesser God of blessing, the lesser goddess of blessing, the lesser goddesses of blessing, the lesser goddess of blessing, the higher God of blessing, the higher gods of blessing, the higher God of blessing, the higher goddess of blessing, the higher goddesses of blessing, the higher goddess of blessing, the lower God of blessing, the lower gods of blessing, the lower God of blessing, the lower goddess of blessing, the lower goddesses of blessing, the lower goddess of blessing, the greater spirit of blessing, the greater spirits of blessing, the greater spirit of blessing, the lesser spirit of blessing, the lesser spirits of blessing, the lesser spirit of blessing, the higher spirit of blessing, the higher spirits of blessing, the higher spirit of blessing, the lower spirit of blessing, the lower spirits of blessing, the lower spirit of blessing, the major God of blessing, the major gods of blessing, the major God of blessing, the major goddess of blessing, the major goddesses of blessing, the major goddess of blessing, the minor God of blessing, the minor gods of blessing, the minor God of blessing, the minor goddess of blessing, the minor goddesses of blessing, the minor goddess of blessing, the superior God of blessing, the superior gods of blessing, the superior God of blessing, the superior goddess of blessing, the superior goddesses of blessing, the superior goddess of blessing, the inferior God of blessing, the inferior gods of blessing, the inferior God of blessing, the inferior goddess of blessing, the inferior goddesses of blessing, the inferior goddess of blessing, the ancestor God of blessing, the ancestor gods of blessing, the ancestor God of blessing, the ancestor goddess of blessing, the ancestor goddesses of blessing, the ancestor goddess of blessing, the ascendant God of blessing, the ascendant gods of blessing, the ascendant God of blessing, the ascendant goddess of blessing, the ascendant goddesses of blessing, the ascendant goddess of blessing, the descendant God of blessing, the descendant gods of blessing, the descendant God of blessing, the descendant goddess of blessing, the descendant goddesses of blessing, the descendant goddess of blessing, the transcendent God of blessing, the transcendent gods of blessing, the transcendent God of blessing, the transcendent goddess of blessing, the transcendent goddesses of blessing, the transcendent goddess of blessing, the past God of blessing, the past gods of blessing, the past God of blessing, the past goddess of blessing, the past goddesses of blessing, the past goddess of blessing, the present God of blessing, the present gods of blessing, the present God of blessing, the present goddess of blessing, the present goddesses of blessing, the present goddess of blessing, the future God of blessing, the future gods of blessing, the future God of blessing, the future goddess of blessing, the future goddesses of blessing, the future goddess of blessing, the authentic God of blessing, the authentic gods of blessing, the authentic God of blessing, the authentic goddess of blessing, the authentic goddesses of blessing, the authentic goddess of blessing, the synthetic God of blessing, the synthetic gods of blessing, the synthetic God of blessing, the synthetic goddess of blessing, the synthetic goddesses of blessing, the synthetic goddess of blessing, the progressive God of blessing, the progressive gods of blessing, the progressive God of blessing, the progressive goddess of blessing, the progressive goddesses of blessing, the progressive goddess of blessing, the regressive God of blessing, the regressive gods of blessing, the regressive God of blessing, the regressive goddess of blessing, the regressive goddesses of blessing, the regressive goddess of blessing, the ordinary God of blessing, the ordinary gods of blessing, the ordinary God of blessing, the ordinary goddess of blessing, the ordinary goddesses of blessing, the ordinary goddess of blessing, the extraordinary God of blessing, the extraordinary gods of blessing, the extraordinary God of blessing, the extraordinary goddess of blessing, the extraordinary goddesses of blessing, the extraordinary goddess of blessing, the static God of blessing, the static gods of blessing, the static God of blessing, the static goddess of blessing, the static goddesses of blessing, the static goddess of blessing, the dynamic God of blessing, the dynamic gods of blessing, the dynamic God of blessing, the dynamic goddess of blessing, the dynamic goddesses of blessing, the dynamic goddess of blessing, the land God of blessing, the land gods of blessing, the land God of blessing, the land goddess of blessing, the land goddesses of blessing, the land goddess of blessing, the sea God of blessing, the sea gods of blessing, the sea God of blessing, the sea goddess of blessing, the sea goddesses of blessing, the sea goddess of blessing, the sky God of blessing, the sky gods of blessing, the sky God of blessing, the sky goddess of blessing, the sky goddesses of blessing, the sky goddess of blessing, the God of blessing, the gods of blessing, the God of blessing, the goddess of blessing, the goddesses of blessing, the goddess of blessing, the half God of blessing, the half gods of blessing, the half God of blessing, the half goddess of blessing, the half goddesses of blessing, the half goddess of blessing, the vessel of blessing, the vessels of blessing, the vessel of blessing, the name of blessing, the names of blessing, the name of blessing, the person of blessing, the persons of blessing, the person of blessing, the persona of blessing, the personas of blessing, the persona of blessing, the personage of blessing, the personages of blessing, the personage of blessing, the personality of blessing, the personalities of blessing, the personality of blessing, the personification of blessing, the personifications of blessing, the personification of blessing, the image of blessing, the images of blessing, the image of blessing, the imagination of blessing, the imaginations of blessing, the imagination of blessing, the belief of blessing, the beliefs of blessing, the belief of blessing, the thought of blessing, the thoughts of blessing, the thought of blessing, the word of blessing, the words of blessing, the word of blessing, the action of blessing, the actions of blessing, the action of blessing, the reaction of blessing, the reactions of blessing, the reaction of blessing, the feeling of blessing, the feelings of blessing, the feeling of blessing, the situation of blessing, the situations of blessing, the situation of blessing, the circumstance of blessing, the circumstances of blessing, the circumstance of blessing, the environment of blessing, the environments of blessing, the environment of blessing, the relationship of blessing, the relationships of blessing, the relationship of blessing, the number of blessing, the numbers of blessing, the number of blessing, the formula of blessing, the formulas of blessing, the formula of blessing, the equation of blessing, the equations of blessing, the equation of blessing, the theory of blessing, the theories of blessing, the theory of blessing, the symbol of blessing, the symbols of blessing, the symbol of blessing, the color of blessing, the colors of blessing, the color of blessing, the thing of blessing, the things of blessing, the thing of blessing, the way of blessing, the ways of blessing, the way of blessing, the place of blessing, the places of blessing, the place of blessing, the time of blessing, the times of blessing, the time of blessing, the event of blessing, the events of blessing, the event of blessing, the result of blessing, the results of blessing, the result of blessing, the crown of blessing, the crowns of blessing, the crown of blessing, the throne of blessing, the thrones of blessing, the throne of blessing, the blessing king, the blessing kings, the blessing kingdom, the blessing kingdoms, the blessing king's subject, the blessing king's subjects, the blessing king's dominion, the blessing king's dominions, the kingdom of blessing, the kingdoms of blessing, the kingdom of blessing, the blessing queen, the blessing queens, the blessing queendom, the blessing queendoms, the blessing queen's subject, the blessing queen's subjects, the blessing queen's dominion, the blessing queen's dominions, the queendom of blessing, the queendoms of blessing, the queendom of blessing, the blessing prince, the blessing princes, the blessing princedom, the blessing princedoms, the blessing prince's subject, the blessing prince's subjects, the blessing prince's dominion, the blessing prince's dominions, the princedom of blessing, the princedoms of blessing, the princedom of blessing, the blessing princess, the blessing princesses, the blessing princessdom, the blessing princessdoms, the blessing princess's subject, the blessing princess's subjects, the blessing princess's dominion, the blessing princess's dominions, the princessdom of blessing, the princessdoms of blessing, the princessdom of blessing, the Lord of blessing, the lords of blessing, the Lord of blessing, the Lordess of blessing, the Lordesses of blessing, the Lordess of blessing, the priest of blessing, the priests of blessing, the priest of blessing, the priestess of blessing, the priestesses of blessing, the priestess of blessing, the ritual of blessing, the rituals of blessing, the ritual of blessing, the shrine of blessing, the shrines of blessing, the shrine of blessing, the temple of blessing, the temples of blessing, the temple of blessing, the leader of blessing, the leaders of blessing, the leader of blessing, the follower of blessing, the followers of blessing, the follower of blessing, the natural substance of blessing, the natural substances of blessing, the natural substance of blessing, the supernatural substance of blessing, the supernatural substances of blessing, the supernatural substance of blessing, the temporal substance of blessing, the temporal substances of blessing, the temporal substance of blessing, the spiritual substance of blessing, the spiritual substances of blessing, the spiritual substance of blessing, the natural form of blessing, the natural forms of blessing, the natural form of blessing, the supernatural form of blessing, the supernatural forms of blessing, the supernatural form of blessing, the temporal form of blessing, the temporal forms of blessing, the temporal form of blessing, the spiritual form of blessing, the spiritual forms of blessing, the spiritual form of blessing, the age of blessing, the ages of blessing, the age of blessing, the era of blessing, the heiress of blessing, the era of blessing, the awakener of blessing, the awakeners of blessing, the awakener of blessing, the awakening of blessing, the awakenings of blessing, the awakening of blessing, the realm of blessing, the realms of blessing, the realm of blessing, the dimension of blessing, the dimensions of blessing, the dimension of blessing, the zone of blessing, the zones of blessing, the zone of blessing, the frequency of blessing, the frequencies of blessing, the frequency of blessing, the century of blessing, the centuries of blessing, the century of blessing, the millennium of blessing, the millenniums of blessing, the millennium of blessing, the purpose of blessing, the purposes of blessing, the purpose of blessing, the meaning of blessing, the meanings of blessing, the meaning of blessing, the culture of blessing, the cultures of blessing, the culture of blessing, the demonstrator of blessing, the demonstrators of blessing, the demonstrator of blessing, the demonstration of blessing, the demonstrations of blessing, the demonstration of blessing, the manifester of blessing, the manifestors of blessing, the manifester of blessing, the manifestation of blessing, the manifestations of blessing, the manifestation of blessing, the presence of blessing, the presences of blessing, the presence of blessing, the glow of blessing, the glows of blessing, the glow of blessing, the goal of blessing, the goals of blessing, the goal of blessing, the plan of blessing, the plans of blessing, the plan of blessing, the book of blessing, the books of blessing, the book of blessing, the philosopher of blessing, the philosophers of blessing, the philosopher of blessing, the philosophy of blessing, the philosophies of blessing, the philosophy of blessing, the releaser of blessing, the releasers of blessing, the releaser of blessing, the release of blessing, the releases of blessing, the release of blessing, the variable of blessing, the variables of blessing, the variable of blessing, the cause of blessing, the causes of blessing, the cause of blessing, the effect of blessing, the effects of blessing, the effect of blessing, the journey of blessing, the journeys of blessing, the journey of blessing, the emergence of blessing, the emergences of blessing, the emergence of blessing, the source of blessing, the sources of blessing, the source of blessing, the originator of blessing, the originators of blessing, the originator of blessing, the origin of blessing, the origins of blessing, the origin of blessing, the forefather of blessing, the forefathers of blessing, the forefather of blessing, the foremother of blessing, the foremothers of blessing, the foremother of blessing, the ancestor of blessing, the ancestors of blessing, the ancestor of blessing, the descendant of blessing, the descendants of blessing, the descendant of blessing, the lineage of blessing, the lineages of blessing, the lineage of blessing, the heritage of blessing, the heritages of blessing, the heritage of blessing, the heir of blessing, the heirs of blessing, the heir of blessing, the co-heir of blessing, the co-heirs of blessing, the co-heir of blessing, the joint heir of blessing, the joint heirs of blessing, the joint heir of blessing, the dynasty of blessing, the dynasties of blessing, the dynasty of blessing, the force of blessing, the forces of blessing, the force of blessing, the law of blessing, the laws of blessing, the law of blessing, the pact of blessing, the pacts of blessing, the pact of blessing, the game of blessing, the games of blessing, the game of blessing, the mask of blessing, the masks of blessing, the mask of blessing, the armor of blessing, the armors of blessing, the armor of blessing, the sword of blessing, the swords of blessing, the sword of blessing, the shield of blessing, the shields of blessing, the shield of blessing, the force shield of blessing, the force shields of blessing, the force shield of blessing, the armored force shield of blessing, the armored force shields of blessing, the armored force shield of blessing, the champion of blessing, the champions of blessing, the champion of blessing, the guardian of blessing, the guardians of blessing, the guardian of blessing, the defender of blessing, the defenders of blessing, the defender of blessing, the protector of blessing, the protectors of blessing, the protector of blessing, the chant of blessing, the chants of blessing, the chant of blessing, the shape of blessing, the shapes of blessing, the shape of blessing, the cube of blessing, the cubes of blessing, the cube of blessing, the cuboid of blessing, the cuboids of blessing, the cuboid of blessing, the sphere of blessing, the spheres of blessing, the sphere of blessing, the spheroid of blessing, the spheroids of blessing, the spheroid of blessing, the prism of blessing, the prisms of blessing, the prism of blessing, the pyramid of blessing, the pyramids of blessing, the pyramid of blessing, the cylinder of blessing, the cylinders of blessing, the cylinder of blessing, the cone of blessing, the cones of blessing, the cone of blessing, the triangle of blessing, the triangles of blessing, the triangle of blessing, the circle of blessing, the circles of blessing, the circle of blessing, the semicircle of blessing, the semicircles of blessing, the semicircle of blessing, the square of blessing, the squares of blessing, the square of blessing, the rectangle of blessing, the rectangles of blessing, the rectangle of blessing, the parallelogram of blessing, the parallelograms of blessing, the parallelogram of blessing, The rhombus of blessing. The rhombus is a blessing. The rhombus of blessing. The trapezoid of blessing. The trapezoid's of blessing. The trapezoid of blessing. The polygon of blessing. The polygons of blessing. The polygon of blessing. The pentagon of blessing. The pentagons of blessing. The pentagon of blessing. The hexagon of blessing. The hexagons of blessing. The hexagon of blessing. The septagon of blessing. The septagons of blessing. The septagon of blessing. The octagon of blessing. The octagons of blessing. The octagon of blessing. The nonagon of blessing. The nonagons of blessing. The nonagon of blessing. The decagon of blessing. The decagons of blessing. The decagon of blessing. The evolution of blessing. The evolutions of blessing. The evolution of blessing. The revolution of blessing. The revolutions of blessing. The revolution of blessing. The elemental art of blessing. The elemental arts of blessing. The elemental art of blessing. The elemental science of blessing. The elemental sciences of blessing. The elemental science of blessing. The elemental principle of blessing. The elemental principles of blessing. The elemental principle of blessing. The elemental technology of blessing. The elemental technologies of blessing. The elemental technology of blessing. The low elemental art of blessing. The low elemental arts of blessing. The low elemental art of blessing. The low elemental science of blessing. The low elemental sciences of blessing. The low elemental science of blessing. The low elemental principle of blessing. The low elemental principles of blessing. The low elemental principle of blessing. The low elemental technology of blessing. The low elemental technologies of blessing. The low elemental technology of blessing. The high elemental art of blessing. The high elemental arts of blessing. The high elemental art of blessing. The high elemental science of blessing. The high elemental sciences of blessing. The high elemental science of blessing. The high elemental principle of blessing. The high elemental principles of blessing. The high elemental principle of blessing. The high elemental technology of blessing. The high elemental technologies of blessing. The high elemental technology of blessing. The agent of blessing. The agents of blessing. The agent of blessing. The agency of blessing. The agencies of blessing. The agency of blessing. The amplifier of blessing. The amplifiers of blessing. The amplifier of blessing. The amplification of blessing. The amplifications of blessing. The amplification of blessing. The enhancer of blessing. The enhancers of blessing. The enhancer of blessing. The enhancement of blessing. The enhancements of blessing. The enhancement of blessing. The magnifier of blessing. The magnifiers of blessing. The magnifier of blessing. The magnification of blessing. The magnifications of blessing. The magnification of blessing. The influencer of blessing. The influencers of blessing. The influencer of blessing. The influence of blessing. The influences of blessing. The influence of blessing. The emanator of blessing. The emanators of blessing. The emanator of blessing. The emanation of blessing. The emanations of blessing. The emanation of blessing. The converger of blessing. The convergers of blessing. The converger of blessing. The convergence of blessing. The convergences of blessing. The convergence of blessing. The aura of blessing. The auras of blessing. The aura of blessing. The impression of blessing. The impressions of blessing. The impression of blessing. The intelligence of blessing. The intelligences of blessing. The intelligence of blessing. The sophistication of blessing. The sophistications of blessing. The sophistication of blessing. The genius of blessing. The geniuses of blessing. The genius of blessing. The polymath of blessing. The polymaths of blessing. The polymath of blessing. The psychic of blessing. The psychics of blessing. The psychic of blessing. The knowledge of blessing. The knowledges of blessing. The knowledge of blessing. The understanding of blessing. The understandings of blessing. The understanding of blessing. The wisdom of blessing. The wisdoms of blessing. The wisdom of blessing. The secret of blessing. The secrets of blessing. The secret of blessing. The mystery of blessing. The mysteries of blessing. The mystery of blessing. The revelation of blessing. The revelations of blessing. The revelation of blessing. The tactic of blessing. The tactics of blessing. The tactic of blessing. The strategy of blessing. The strategies of blessing. The strategy of blessing. The strength of blessing. The strengths of blessing. The strength of blessing. The might of blessing. The mights of blessing. The might of blessing. The power of blessing. The powers of blessing. The power of blessing. The authority of blessing. The authorities of blessing. The authority of blessing. The dominion of blessing. The dominions of blessing. The dominion of blessing. The rhythm of blessing. The rhythms of blessing. The rhythm of blessing. The melody of blessing. The melodies of blessing. The melody of blessing. The music of blessing. The musics of blessing. The music of blessing. The lyric of blessing. The lyrics of blessing. The lyric of blessing. The song of blessing. The songs of blessing. The song of blessing. The dance of blessing. The dances of blessing. The dance of blessing. The spirit of blessing. The spirits of blessing. The spirit of blessing. The soul of blessing. The souls of blessing. The soul of blessing. The body of blessing. The bodies of blessing. The body of blessing. The mark of blessing. The marks of blessing. The mark of blessing. The promise of blessing. The promises of blessing. The promise of blessing. The visionary of blessing. The visionaries of blessing. The visionary of blessing. The vision of blessing. The visions of blessing. The vision of blessing. The picture of blessing. The pictures of blessing. The picture of blessing. The sound of blessing. The sounds of blessing. The sound of blessing. The dung of blessing. The dungs of blessing. The dung of blessing. The language of blessing. The languages of blessing. The language of blessing. The communication of blessing. The communications of blessing. The communication of blessing. The people of blessing. The peoples of blessing. The people of blessing. The society of blessing. The societies of blessing. The society of blessing. The fortress of blessing. The fortresses of blessing. The fortress of blessing. The government of blessing. The governments of blessing. The government of blessing. The city of blessing. The cities of blessing. The city of blessing. The nation of blessing. The nations of blessing. The nation of blessing. The civilization of blessing. The civilizations of blessing. The civilization of blessing. The world of blessing. The worlds of blessing. The world of blessing.